Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our budget meeting for this evening, special meeting of council. This is Wednesday, January the 18th, 6:30 p.m., and I will call this meeting to order. I will remind council members of any disclosures of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Seeing none noted, we will then move into section 3, the 2023-2024 operating budget draft, which entitles a report from Lauren James, that's TR 0123, regarding the 2023-2024 operating budget draft. Mr. James.
Good evening, your worship, members of council. Before you is the inaugural budget of the new council. I thought I'd start off with an opening address. This budget is really a reflection of what this council wants to effectively achieve over the next 4 years. One being the substantial amount of reserve payment to the Project Ojibwe for 2025, as well as the ability that it positions the municipality of Banff for both capital programs, as well as additional opportunities of grants going forward. In a similar past, the budget is based on the same methodology that's used in the past. Both it shows the local levy impact on the first page, the year-over-year change for the BAM portion of tax between residential, farm, commercial, and industrial. And we've used the same assessment values year over year to give a illustrative point of view. Obviously, we still have the same impacts, whether it's the annual energy, currency was up and down with the Canadian dollar as well as the US dollar, and also the impacting of some of the European to Canadian exchange rate translations, as well as the current CPI, which is still right around 6 to 6.5% in the province of Ontario. We're projecting OMPF reductions going forward to 2%, as well as our capital program funding needs continue to increase, both with construction price index increasing, as well as improving our asset book and shortening the deficit between our AMP to actual. One other area of concern it seems to be a trend, and that I know it's been advocated both in the municipal sector, is the ongoing insurance premium rises. That is a troubling concern for all municipalities in the area. Down below highlights truly the levy impact, also the what's considered discretionary. Part of this is non-discretionary, which is the 330,686 for the guarantorship loan, which is both a blended interest and principal. Highlights concerns about federal and provincial transfers further down. One consistent theme from last year is the MPAC assessment book is still on a pause. MPAC has not returned to their annual assessment review cycle. We are still living also in a post-COVID-19 environment, so there is some additional compliance and health and safety costs that have to be considered. As I alluded to, debt renewal project Ojibwe in 25 is a very large leading issue for council consideration. And the other points have been made, both exchange and insurance. If council at this time has any questions on the staff report before we start into each of the operating budgets, I know.
Just a quick note that after Treasurer James fields any comments, we will be moving towards the operating budget consultation results, comments with members of the public, and I'll be speaking to those.
Thank you for that. Okay, thank you for the presentation, Lauren. Does anyone have any questions immediately before going in? So everyone has a clear understanding of the objectives of this particular budget. Just to clarify again, and perhaps say it another way, we're presenting this as a strategic budget moving forward to help set the tone for the next 4 years.
That is correct, your worship.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, and I do appreciate that we have some challenges coming up shortly, particularly 2025. Correct. This has to be dealt with. Okay. Not seeing any other questions or comments from council members, I would invite the results of the consultation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council, the budget consultation was conducted from February on through the majority of 2022. We did extend it as the budget consultation period for capital was extended, which necessitated an extension to operating as well. Similar to the way that the capital comments were handled, I will be handling the themes generally rather than comment by comment for brevity. We did receive a number of comments regarding social media. Fair points. So in 2022, council did receive a staff report regarding social media. Now opted at the time to utilize Voyant Alert as a unidirectional communication tool for BAM. Uptake has been solid in 2022 and continues into 2023. As many out there know, and as council is aware, that we will be issuing an RFP later this year for a new website. Oftentimes new websites include integration of social media into their platforms. So we anticipate later this year, Q2 or early Q3, looking at bringing another report back to council regarding social media as a secondary unidirectional communication tool. We did receive some comments regarding beautification in all communities, hanging planters, hanging pots and the sort. These are handled operationally through Public Works and are currently covered in the budget. General comments also about the Ojibwa, about promoting the sub, generating revenue, whatever it happens to be. I would like to reiterate to council and to members of the public that the Ojibwa is not a municipal asset. We have no interest in it whatsoever, aside from having to repay the debt through the guarantorship loan agreement. Outside of this, the municipality is not involved in the Ojibwa in any way and will not be entering into any sort of promotion whatsoever. Comments about general cleanliness and cleaning addressed through the lot maintenance bylaw, through bylaw enforcement officer and bylaw services. We have recently onboarded tenant bylaw services to provide secondary and backup services to the fire chief, who also doubles as the bylaw enforcement officer. Any complaints pertaining to bylaw enforcement or matters can be submitted through our website through the confidential form. There have been some comments regarding increased policing. This is something that we are looking into early this year into sort of one-off inquiries. Generally, these are handled through the OPP. However, additional enforcement can be requested through BAM's representative on the Police Services Board. These comments were drafted prior to the appointment of the new representative, Deputy Mayor Giguère from Malahide, who is representing Malahide and BAM over the next term. Any inquiries regarding PSB should be directed at her. Abandoned or vacant buildings should be painted. This is not our municipal responsibility. This would be a private landowner responsibility or would fall under lot maintenance dependent on received complaints. We did have some comments about parking in downtown Vienna. I would advise the plank is a county road. On-street parking would be at the discretion of the county. Further comments about the cenotaph. This would be an added cost to the budget. I've been advised by the Public Works Manager, who's in attendance tonight, these shrubs were tended to in 2022. General comments about inquiries about what lands the municipality owns, allocations under the bench program. We do have a bench program. This is being considered tomorrow night at the regular session meeting. The policy does require updates, and that will be handled at that time. There is a comment in the budget about professional arborists to look at the trees in the Vienna Community Park. And this could be considered as part of the 2023 maintenance, and staff will be considering it as such. So general comments about COVID budget and budgeting for research. So the municipality is empirically based. We have a number of studies on our website that the municipality bases its decisions around. We allocate a certain amount of money per project into background studies to support our decisions. And these are often made public when received by council and then posted on the website. We do also have increased cleaning costs still in operational budget lines due to COVID, and also due to it being flu season and a particularly virulent flu season as well. See what other comments we've got. So, a couple of matters in here about, complaints regarding, a couple of private property owners that weren't fully addressed. These were directed to the LPRCA 2021, and have been addressed from our end. We have no jurisdiction over regulated lands under the LPRCA. Another comment about, donating or giving away land, to the, Edison Museum. No consideration at this time for donating land to the budget. There was a comment about the VCC as an evacuation point. I would like to make it clear once more, to everybody that, the municipality only has the option to utilize the VCC as part of our emergency response plan. To date, we are not obligated to do so, and it is not part of our plan. There's also the concern that as the VCC is not deemed an accessible facility, it would not be used as such. So just to make that clear for council and for anybody observing. BAM needs to look into the development of municipal teams and events for children. So we do not currently have a standalone Parks and Recreation budget or a department rather, nor do we have the staff to address this request right now. And additional Parks and Rec staff under the Public Works Department is not considered in the budget. Another matter regarding private landowner. And there is a request for a community business committee. Council received a report regarding establishing committees of council. The community business committee was not recommended at that time, and direction for same was not given. And we also do not have the budget for any sort of economic development in that stead. Economic development would be handled through County of Elgin. They do have the Elgin Incentives Program. This program has been utilized by an organization in BAM recently and successfully. Anyone looking to utilize it from a business perspective should look in further into the program. Information on the matter is on our website. And with that, Mr. Mayor, that is the comments received, and I am available for questions as our staff. Otherwise, Treasurer James is ready to dive into the meat of the budget.
Well, thank you for that. Does anyone have any questions on the comments or any concerns? You can always hold them until the end if you wish. All right, Lauren, would you like to take us through the budget then, please?
All right, let's start on the page 14 of the PDF for the municipality of BAM summary of revenues. So our 2023 total revenues will be 15,486,636 for each department aggregately. Obviously, we run a balanced budget, so our total expense for the year operating capital will be 15,486,663. That's just the summary sheets. The net revenues show the year-over-year changes between the departments. Really, there isn't much between each of the departments from a net revenue point of view. The big takeaway is there's a little bit more expense this year in Public Works, because of fuel and some other cost drivers that are unavoidable. When you look at the net expense, most of them are in line with what considered CPI. When you factor out the fuel and other outliers. Moving into general taxation. So our general taxation for 2023 to support our operating budget will be total revenues of $5,743,102. And it's broken out there by the residential class. As you see, residential housing is the anchor, followed by farmlands, commercial, industrial, pipe, and then managed forest. And moving into other revenues, year-over-year change from OMPF. Last year we were 905.1. This year we're 897. So small drop. Interest on tax arrears expected to be lower in the current, but larger in the prior. Fortunately, we are carrying a fair amount of prior year tax receivable on our books, as well as additional investment income anticipated with the rising interest rates of the Bank of Canada. Also note, for council, for the new members of council this year. We do a utility corridor transfer every year, so that utility corridor number at the bottom. That money we receive, we then transfer to our trail reserve. That's an annual thing that we've been doing consistently for close to 12 years. Let's dive into the general government. So the general government for the year, total revenues 77,000. Again, very static compared to 2022 budget. And very comparable to 2022 actuals. For council consideration, the actuals are only up until the end of November 30th, 2022. When the final bylaws come back to council, they will include all the year-end actuals up to after the audited date. So you'll see all the actuals for year-end date. Again, very much comparable year over year. The big outlier in general government is you got some increased payroll for the year, both with CPI and with performance reviews. Beyond that, it's very scoped, considered a lean or a below CPI budget. The net expense for the general government is 1.31 million. Prior year is 1.245. So again, below CPI level. If there's any questions on the general, I'll pause there. Otherwise, we will go to the council events.
Not seeing any questions, so let's
Yeah.
continue.
Council expense for the year, no revenues as there's no election and no reserve transfers. Year over year CPI, as well as a bit of return to normal for council for conferences and seminars. Again, it's a very static budget compared to prior years. Prior year was 93, this year is 95.1. So again, very static. Moving into the fire department. Year over year, we've actually had a very good actual fees and service charge for 46. A lot of that is fire and municipal vehicle collision recovery. One caveat to that, so the council understands, we budget lower because some of that collection at times can be very challenging. And it turns into challenging fights with insurance or other entities. So that number is very conservative. So I would not caution council raising that number, but it's very volatile too. Again, salaries and wages very comparable. The points you're going to see on the fire remuneration, it was at the end of November, but I can give council an update. That points number for the year was only 135. So we are in line, and the expectation for next year is very comparable. We had what's considered a quieter fire year on a points basis. Medical calls are still an area of concern for where our calls are derived. Beyond that, it's a very static budget in this department. Some small increases for equipment and some small increases for training on some new volunteer firefighters. No questions in fire.
The fees and service charges, this, you're talking about the marquee, fire marquee.
That's fire marquee as well as cost recoveries for individual landowners and insurance companies for any fire or NBC reimbursements. So that's cost recovery expenses. So fire marquee as well as we do our own internally as well.
Thank you, Pat. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. On the 911 other expenses, what would that? Aside from dispatching, which I see as a separate line, what would the other include?
So that is part of the dispatching. So that's the 911 fee that we paid for our Airbnb service. So when you call in, it can either be non-emergency, fire, or other. So that is our share of the Elgin County cost.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Moving on to police services. We are projecting to have POA revenues, since we've had a somewhat return to COVID, post-COVID. We've actually collected some POA revenues in the back end of 22. And all indications from the county treasurer is we're going to start to receive some POAs going forward. So they're budgeted. The police service contract is very cost neutral from the point of CPI. And then we have a small increase for the fees and service charge, which is the prisoner transfer fee share between the county and central. Moving on to the CA. As council is aware, the CA budget was on your agenda package, I believe, 2 councils previously. Again, very small increase, and we have a $5,000 for this year for the tree program. And what that alludes to, and Megan can answer that one, is about how many trees or how many residents would that accommodate with the 5,000?
I believe last year when we did the 5,000, I think we had 130.
So we have a small uptick. So if council considers they want to add more, this was an item of discussion last year's budget. I know it was very well subscribed, your worship. It's been a good program for the municipality and our residents. So again, that's something for consideration if we want to either A, increase it or come back with a later staff report.
Okay, thank you for that moment. Now, Steve, do you recall, did we exhaust that budget last year?
Yes, through your worship. We actually cut people off. We extended it, but we ended up cutting the reserve of overflow, I guess you can say. And I think this year is gonna be the same, because I've had quite a few reach outs to myself asking when the program's gonna be started, so. Currently, I don't believe we have the new price on the trees either yet, so we did request this. However, we haven't heard anything back from the CAA. They were waiting on their contracts as well, so we could see a little bit of inflation on that as well, on everything else.
Well, I gotta admit, I'm actually quite pleased that the program is well subscribed to and it's being used. And I think it's worthwhile keeping. I don't think we're gonna solve all the tree plantings or desired in 1 year. So do you think there's any merits to increase the budget? But I think as long as we provide something, then we can keep moving year after year. I realize it's first come, first served, but yes, Councillor Chilcott.
Thank you. Yes, I believe each person is entitled to 3 trees, or they can apply for 3 trees. Would it be possible to reduce that to 2, and that budget will go further? Through more people. They can apply again next year for 2 more.
Well, it's a thought. You'd think that after a while, they'd run out of room to put trees. But no, I understand.
Just, I mean, we can't afford to put a lot of money into anything right now, because we've got other items on need to be done. So this is one way of getting to more people and not increasing our costs.
Well, what does staff want to offer comment on that?
Just a quick comment, if I may, that will require revision of the policy regarding the tree program. We can certainly look into that if council wishes, or we can return with a staff report, either or. We will do whatever council wishes.
Thank you for that. Yes, Steve, please.
Further on Thomas's comment there, if we were to bring staff report back, another option out there is the trees themselves.
Yes.
We are using between 6 and 8 foot trees. The option to downsize the trees, neighboring municipalities use seedlings. I mean, there's a variety of options there. If this is something council, I'd be happy to, throw some options together and bring it back as a, because that's another option. Thinking about this, I know we've been delivering municipal time, staff time, delivering the trees as well. So reducing the amount per household also, like we're 2 days usually delivering, so there is a little bit of staff time involved in that. So Meg and I have been discussing possibly other options for even pickup, but this can all be included within a report.
Thank you for that, Steve. As a follow-up, what's the survival rate on these 6 foot seedlings or trees?
Through, you know what, we've had pretty good, all the ones we planted in at the when we started this program, we planted a surplus of them in Eden in the park. And out of the 32 that were planted there, last year there was, I think the student said there's 18. Now, we're not we're not going out there and watering them either. So this was in the back, along the back tree line, so. You do see them out there. They are in people's yards, and they do, that size tree definitely needs some attention when they get planted.
Agreed. I think it needs more TLC than a seedling. I was just trying to get a sense of what would be the better value. And I certainly appreciate Councillor Chilcott's comments about trying to extend it as far as we can. Providing these things live, and people are gonna have to look after, them, of course.
Through you,
Yes, Councillor Anderson.
Steve, like, is there a better survivability with like a 3-foot tree instead of a 6-foot? Like, and then it fits in the budget and that would better serve more people. I mean, that's only like 2 more years of growth or something.
That's right.
Maybe I don't think seedlings will stand much of a chance because you have to worry about weed control or something, but
That's
maybe
correct.
a tree that's somewhere in between would be a better option and less weight and everything else when delivering, I guess. I would assume.
Did you have a rebuttal for that?
No, I was just gonna give a general underlying theme. I think this is the 5th year we've done this program. The first year was a half year. Just a thought for council, we've got a $5,000 placeholder. Maybe it's better to direct staff to come back and report on both size options as well as then the final costing from LRPRCA. Determine how many houses we can support, and then we can quantify how many people have used the program over the last 5 years, whether it's the same people or number of houses. We can get that data, as well as how much staff can cost. So maybe just direct it back to staff work, and if we need more money, then we add, last year we added a couple more grand.
Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kind of along the same line, I think we're onto something good here. Doesn't look like it needs changing to me. We started at $1,500 in 2019 and we're up to 5,000 and there's good uptake. I think we're onto something good. I don't know if we should change a good thing.
I tend to agree, and I think it's a prudent course to have staff come back and present us with the options on that. What seed stuff or sizing or whatever, and yeah, there may be an option there to actually say, you extend the volume, but keep the dollar value here. And I guess that's the question before council right now. Are you comfortable with that dollar back, 5,000? And then we can always adjust seedling or the trees, or wherever else to match that.
Through you,
Okay.
your worship, the dollar amount to me is comfortable. I think we maybe should look at a size of tree that's more survivable. And since are we directing the type of species? Can we say, well, what's better for our community, like more like heritage trees or Carolinian trees or some kind of, if there's options for that, that would be, certainly interesting, like gum trees or whatever that's lacking in the natural thing that used to be part of the environment.
Yeah, I think that's again, something that could be included in a report back to us. It seems to me, if I recall, the seed stock that we're getting is recommended by LPRCA. They have a wide variety that, okay, so. Do you need a motion or something to tag it so that we can come back on?
Mr. Mayor, I do have some language. We can include it in the final motion to approve the budget. So when that comes up, let me know and I've got some language for you.
All right, you just as long as it's noted that we don't lose staff report. All right, thank you for that. Nice discussion. Moving on.
Moving now to building services. Building services revenue, 192,000 year-over-year projected. We did have a substantial good year in 2022. However, there is some slowdown anticipated. We're anticipating more slowdown in the back end of 24. A very static budget, and it factors in both our current contracted services as well as the dams moving forward. So, building services is currently presented as is. Bylaw, there's no longer dog tag revenues. That program's been removed. That's the common question of the residents come to counter. What about a dog tag? They find out there's no more dog tag and they're happy. But we are encouraging the owners to get their dogs checked. Again, very static in the expense side. Reducing the service contract going forward. Now moving to public works. Year-over-year revenue increase of 37,000, which basically factors in the CPI increase on the county road maintenance agreement. Very static on the sundry side, which is cost recovery as well as special billings for municipal public works time. And then static on the permit side, which is basically large permit fees for large trucks, clearance permits and laneway permits. On the wage side, very static, factors in both the current labor complement as well as any step increases or QP collective agreements. Biggest outlier in here is the main cost drivers are some of the cost materials are greater than CPI, as you can see, and fuel costs. We're looking at a 185 to 190 fuel line until diesel comes in under control. We are in the locked hedge contract and that has provided us savings, but there's not much more we can do. We need to operate equipment, we have machine time, that's not a going away trend. Beyond that, smaller year anticipated for drainage assessments, as council aware, there's not many drains on our books, we don't have much road to drain apportionment. And a very status quo year for the rest of the department. This is one of those departments where CPI can really come up in the middle of the year. So definitely if council sees something, they wonder when you look at the year-over-year actuals. And we're actually trying to rate last year's expenses in for this year. So that's just an item for consideration for council and public works. Winter control, very status quo, only indexed for CPI and contracts. Luckily, we've had a really good winter so far in 23. That's positive. Streetlights, very minimal, as council's aware, we did the streetlight program back in 15. It's actually will officially have broke even on the investment. At this point forward, we'll be in the black, as they say. Again, very status quo on expense and maintenance. Moving over to wastewater. We have eclipsed the $1 million revenue of the budget for wastewater, so that's really good. That wastewater review will be coming up in 2025, Mr. Rolson, is that correct? So that'll be time for wastewater, water and wastewater rate studies to come back. Again, very status quo in the departments. A lot of this is driven by some CPI. However, some of the true expense tailwinds have reduced themselves in the back end of 2022. A lot of this stuff is either procured at special places in the United States and California or in Germany. So we've seen some reductions and some supply constraints ease, especially in this department, which is very good. As well as wastewater and water are very precious commodities and a requirement of services as council aware with the regs. And we're projecting to have a reserve transfer at year end of 368. As council is aware, we've actually last year we had 422, and this year we're projecting between 320 and 350. So really solid reserve transfers going into the accounts for future capital. So really solid operations, and I applaud Mr. Wilson and his department for the excellent execution of the department year over year. Moving into water. Water revenues for the year projected to be 770,000. As council is aware, there is no longer landowner debenture payments. That final year of eclipse was in 20 and 21, so that's no longer. Projected transfer at the end for the water department is 88,000. Again, that's really subjective. If we don't have any breaks for the year, the transfer easily goes over 100. If we have many breaks, sometimes the transfer is almost close to zero. So it truly is based on line service, line break, loss, as well as any outages. So that's just one thing to consideration. But again, it's well controlled, well maintained, and it's heavily regulated as Mr. Wilson has indicated on many staff reports. Richmond Water projected to have over 100,000 in revenue for the year. Transfers to the reserve of 27,000. And we are still getting people asking to connect to the system. So that's very positive for the village of Richmond, as well also very positive for new development. So we can usually get inquiries every couple of months for new connections. So again, very positive from the village point of view. Moving in the waste management, revenue is down to 71,000. We no longer get the RIPIC grants. We'll still continue to get the MRF, but that'll slowly scale down. And then we also anticipate your garbage tags to level out on the cost. Waste disposal is still the same number. However, recycling is only projected to be half, and I'll let Mr. Thayer speak more to the waste management.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thanks, Lauren. Through you, Mr. Mayor to Council. Yeah, just a reiteration that council chose in August to opt out of the Blue Box transition. Blue Box transition is in the process of moving over to producer responsibility organizations under the appropriate OREG. So Circular Materials Ontario is working with Norfolk Disposal to continue with providing service to residential landowners. There should be no disruption in service as this transfers over. The date of the transfer is July the 1st. Per the OREG, any industrial or commercial properties will be required at that time to have their own pickup in place, as commercial and industrial is not included as part of the transition. The number in the budget for 129,500 recognizes half a year worth of service under the existing contract with Norfolk for the municipality. After that time, the responsibility moves elsewhere. So that would be why the figure is the way that it is. We haven't appropriated or put any money into any of the RIPRA grants. Those are generally with respect to recycling, and the program is transitioning out. We will likely lose funding there, and we figured it was a safe, a conservative move to not allocate any revenues in that line for the year.
Moving on to cemeteries, very status quo. The council is aware that we do have some cemeteries in our portfolio, so that's why we have sundry revenue. And we have still 3 active ones that we manage internally. We still have active burials and active sales of plots. As well as we still have some inactive that we still have to manage, both grass cutting as well as any maintenance. So again, that's a pretty status normal compared to prior years. Municipal assistance is not budgeted for in 23 for any grants, and we have 7,000 for municipal assistant and applications. So any of the groups or events in the past have made application to council. So that is there for the 7,000. Moving to parks, in the revenue line in 23, we only have the grants and subsidies, which is for the student grants through the SEP program. Again, a little uptick in expense for the year, and a lot of that has to do with grounds maintenance as well as the increase in insurance for the park. Strathville Community Center we're projecting some rental revenues in 23. As you saw, we did receive over 12,000 in revenues in the back end of 22. So we're anticipating a gradual return to rental revenues here. And operation expenses of 56,000, which when you look at it, it's a normal year compared to a 19 or 20 based on a normal pre-COVID year.
Yes, Thomas, go ahead, please.
Just another comment with respect to the rentals line under revenues for the Stratfordville Community Center. As council is aware, we did receive the grant through ISIP for the expansion at this building. We continue to work with A-Link on detailed costing and tendering documents. While we are still waiting on a definitive timeline, as there could very well be a scope reduction due to costs. We anticipate tendering in Q2 of this year, with construction potentially starting near the start of Q3. So once that firms up with the architect, we will be reaching out to the Stratfordville Hall Foundation to further advise. We didn't feel it prudent to put more into the rentals line, given that we may only have half a year of rentals. So just some information for context for council.
So theoretically, the hall still could be available till, say, July or August.
Yes, the hall could be available till July or August, and we are not 100% sure on full building impacts yet. I expect that they'll be doing a lot of the work for the foundation and the main structure, the expansion early in the summer while the weather is good. Rentals for the trackless will likely still be available. And after they move further south on the expansion, it may free up the main hall for rentals, but we don't know what that looks like at this point in time. We'll have more information forthcoming.
but you, staff are comfortable with that $8,000 figure. All right, thank you.
The next schedule, that's just their, both for summation and for comparative of prior. So, those both have, zero revenues and zero expenses, so that will fall off and next year's will just be summated, on the main summary sheets. Libraries for the year, revenue increases based on CPI and transfer to facility reserve of 39,774. Otherwise, it's a very static, library expense budget.
Before you go any further, I know these arrangements had been signed. When did they take effect? You recall?
I believe, Mr. Mayor, it was January 1st.
Okay, so this reflects the,
That's correct.
square footage. Great. All right, thank you.
Museums, but BAM. Revenues for 16.2. Expense for the year 56. As council is aware, we received additional grants in 22, which will then be reserved at year end for 22 into the museum's reserve account. Otherwise, a very static budget. So yeah. Moving over to development services. 23 revenues for the year projected to be 60,000 between the different planning services we offer. And then increases both in the consulting fees as well as CPI for the wages and for the membership fees. So again, very, very static. There will be additional revisions in the actuals because some files were not completed year ends, they have to be pushed to deferred revenue. So when council gets the final, we'll see the year-over-year change in planning revenues.
One comment, just for some more context for council on development services. Council in 2022 did direct us to work with Malahide on looking at building and planning fees with the principle of moving closer towards a cost recovery framework for planning. So the council will note that the last 4 years of actuals, the municipality has generally run between $80,000 and $100,000 in deficit, which means that the levy is supporting development services to that effect. We expect to have some more information coming in the short term that will suggest revised fees for planning applications, moving us closer towards cost recovery in that department. So that information should be coming later in Q1. Just wanted to advise council of that.
Next one is the tourism budget. Lease revenues for 15,000 for 23. And then expenses for the line of 64. So this is basically the beach budget. Basically the main cost driver in here that can have some play is the beach maintenance and beautification. So just take that consideration. I know Steve's department does a really good job in keeping it well groomed. But that does come with additional costs as well as both machine time, labor and staff time.
Okay, just to comment on there, you look at the actuals over the past several years. Are you comfortable to have enough in there to take care of the beach maintenance? I realized there was a lot of work that was done last spring. So I anticipated the 36,000. But you look 2 years prior, 30,000, 30,000, was 25 going to do it?
It might be a touch light.
So just bringing that to council's attention. All right, moving on.
Municipal drainage, as council is aware, OMAFRA picks up a portion of the drainage superintendent time. And then it's offset against his wages from time, staff benefits, as well as any conferences and training. So our capital revenues for 2023 is 5.684. Our capital expenditures for the year projected are 7,327,000. 7,372,500 for a net capital levy of 1,688,249. At this time, if the council has any questions. Or any general arcing questions or,
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Emerson.
If we're gonna have a late winter and we save money on, this is my first two questions on road maintenance and whatnot. Is it possible to divert some of that part of the budget to the beach maintenance? Like, we just shuffle that money around, because it looks like we're gonna come on the light side of road maintenance and stuff.
so if we're over in one department and under in the other, as long as the net. Year-end surplus or net operating is in the good, then yes, and it does happen. You can have budgets, departments be over and under. It matters on the net impact.
Of course, just to clarify for that, Thomas, before I comment, go ahead.
Just a quick comment that winter control is one of those somewhat nebulous functions where it's very dependent on the weather, but also it's split over Q1 and Q4 in a calendar year. So while we may have a gentle winter early in 23, we could have a very heavy start to the winter and the end of the year. So consideration has to be taken into account from that perspective too.
Okay, understood. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was just looking for an opportunity. And a supplementary to that is, since we're gonna be discussing our emergency response plan at upcoming meeting, is there gonna be room in the budget if we decide we have to have some capital expenditures to ensure that everybody's safe in the next possible catastrophic event?
Through the mayor to Councillor Emerson. We still have reserves in ammunition to use. So I wouldn't be recommending adding more to this budget tonight. I would wait for the impact and costing. We have 4 different reserves that are at council's disposal to deal with that, both from the liability reserve, both from working capital, and any equipment that can support a department as well as emergencies. So I would eat on the side of caution, wait for the expense, and then use the corresponding reserve that makes sense.
Rather than playing a guessing game. Yes, I agree. I think that's prudent.
I just. Excuse me, but I'm just trying to make sure that we're not gonna cut ourselves short, because. It's quite possible we can anticipate some expenditure to improve the safety in the communities, I would say.
Through to the mayor, to Councilor Emerson again, staff have already had internal discussions about potential cost impacts. We've already identified a possible up in a lower and upper range, as well as reserves to fund. So we've already had those initial conversations after our debrief. So there's reserves. Mr. Thayer could probably speak to more arcing point of view for the homeless pie as a whole, but there's adequate money for whatever we need to, replace or shore up.
That's the nature of reserves.
That's right.
One other thing I wanted to make absolutely clear or clarify on that before any surpluses from one department was transferred to another department, it would be preceded by a staff report, a request. The council has the opportunity to approve that. Okay. Thanks for clearing that up. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Lauren, in the cemeteries file, can I just clarify? We had the grounds maintenance was almost double compared to from 2021 to 2022. But when I attended the meeting, they actually decreased the amount of cuts. So can you just comment as to why it was doubled?
So through the mayor to Deputy Mayor Weiser, in 2021, when we had the joint cemetery board meeting, we advised the cemetery boards, Strasburg, Eden, Bam West, Colton, Guysborough, and the ones that we manage, which is Eden, Light, Dobie, and then the inactive ones, that the RFP was going to be substantially more because of the cost and for diesel and for fuel, and that those boards asked for reduced cuts. Therefore, we followed reduced cuts for ours as well. But the cost have nearly doubled. And it is a growing concern for our cemetery boards that I hear on a quarterly or annual basis of maintenance costs are being outreached, and the care and maintenance funding they're getting is insufficient. It is an underlying theme. And we have heard that from some of our cemeteries and treasurers of those cemeteries that are part of the BAM cemetery portfolio.
Okay, supplemental.
If I may, yes, thank you so much. So I know there was a discussion a while back about possibly bringing that internally. Is that something that is up for discussion or
We're talking about grass cutting.
correct?
I'm gonna pass that over to Mr. Adams.
Mhm.
Yeah, through your worship, Deputy Mayor. Yes, and if you remember, Lauren touched on our grass cutting expenses in 2021 nearly doubled. We did go with the lowest bid at the time. And we, at that time, we did talk about possibly bringing this in house as well. I have looked into some overlying expenses. There's obviously some big capital expenses with it, along with logistics on staffing. Summer students generally, we can't get them to cover full months. So, I mean, it's definitely a council's wish if they want a proposal brought to them on doing this. There's gonna be some, like to hire temps, possibly. You know, we can buy the lawnmowers, we used to do it. We didn't do at that time all the cemeteries. We only did our parks and rec and our municipal buildings. So there's definitely some added cost there. It's a pretty big picture. However, if that's something council wishes.
Before I go any, Thomas, Steve, any sense of what is better off for this county, from a costing perspective? In-house or contraction,
I do believe,
notwithstanding the capital purchase of one.
that's
I'm
right.
Talking operating.
The staffing issues that we're dealing with right now, it's a hard question to answer.
All right.
Because not just ourselves, neighboring municipalities are having problems with summer students, the hiring process. So as much as I'd like to say we could have a better service level, we could be more reactive if there was a complaint that came in. For sure, however, we're gonna have a couple bumper months where we're gonna be struggling. If we're working on capital projects, I have to designate 2-3 of my full-time operators. Or I have to bring in seasonal temps, which my last hiring, I never got it. So that's kind of the, that's the tough part.
Essentially,
you said,
staffing challenge.
I think the capital part is the easy part on this
All right.
and long-term savings, absolutely.
Okay, Thomas first.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Steve covered the majority of what I was going to say. We can get summer students in-house May to August, but we would start grass cutting in April, so we would have to rely on works, and that is assuming we get summer students. We've been lucky the past few years, but if we should run into an issue where we can't attract summer students in our works department, then if we have it internal for grass cutting, we'd be required to hire seasonal or temp on the fly, and that's not something that we'd be aware of until, March, April in a given year. It is a bit of a staffing crunch, so just further context there.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. So are we looking at the majority of our overages are related to actual fuel, like diesel costs? Or is it just across the board?
It's the contracted rate of the RFP. Through your mayor, mayor to deputy mayor, it's a contracted rate in the RFP. So yes, you have CPI of the labor in there, you have fuel costs, you have all that. That's the contracted rate for each of the defined areas that we put out the RFP. So, like Steve's saying, you got labor headwinds, you got availability of people. Buying the equipment is not the hard issue. It's what are we gonna do when the student is not still in school? What are we gonna do when the student goes back to school in September? How we cover off those stub periods, as well as getting proper supervision oversight. That's another one underlying fee.
Okay.
But but to answer your question, it is a concern that is raised every time with the cemetery boards, and I know I can't escape it. They are upset about the grass cutting rates. I know people are upset about we reduced the cuts.
Yes.
And they've reduced the cuts because of the cost. And I also will indicate to council that this past year was one of our worst years for care and maintenance collection in the municipality's history, which also impacts how the care and maintenance fund grows. So the fact that we're not selling that many plots and the fact that we're not selling that many stones and collecting that perpetual care and maintenance is a concern for all the cemeteries as a whole. But the grass cutting impacts both the cemeteries and the underlying costs, both for our operations here and our parks and facilities.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Supplementary. Just one last question, Lauren. Level of service is a big issue with the cemeteries, and I mean, I understand it is a costing issue. But as our rep for Bayham, any suggestions moving forward? I think most of it is, we have had a call out for volunteerism and things like that, and we're not getting the help at the cemeteries, but it is difficult when you go there and it doesn't look cared for. And that reflects, like, the community sees that. So any suggestions on how we can mitigate against that without increasing the cost?
So through the mayor, to deputy mayor, I would encourage every member of council to encourage your friends or family in your respective areas that want to be active in the cemetery, whether they have coming up active interment or they have family that's buried there, take an active interest. What that means is maybe they join the board in a passive form. Maybe they join the board and help with the annual spring or fall cleanup. Maybe they're just another name that can help when there isn't available staff or municipal resources to accommodate a burial or a marker or a locate. We have two big cemeteries that doesn't have a board. It is managed by the municipality. So there's underlying trends that we need a call for community involvement. And I grew up in Bayham. We used to have many members on the board that I, have family in, and that board is declining and declining. Unfortunately, that's a fundamental theme of our boards, that age is catching up to me. There's no renewal of members. And I would encourage everybody on this council to, encourage neighbors, friends, that if they want to have an interest in these cemeteries because they have family being interned or other, join. We never discourage membership.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Thomas.
Just follow up Lauren's comments, very much accurate. When in one of my previous lives, I was a cemetery administrator myself. And it's very difficult to recruit volunteers for cemetery boards. Bayham is in a very interesting spot where it has a large number of cemeteries for a very small municipality. And we also don't have a large Parks and Rec portfolio. So we don't have a standalone Parks and Rec department that we could expand. If we were looking at bringing this internally, because of the requirement to have seasonal staff and the requirement to have dedicated oversight, we would really be looking at establishing a seasonal Parks and Rec department. And given the capital outlay to establish that, in my estimation, it's a bit of an overreach for us right now. It is definitely a consideration given some of the service concerns we've had regarding cemetery and upkeep, but at the same time, we're in a very unique situation, and financially, I don't believe it's something that we can consider right now with the tight budget that we have. And this isn't just a problem that we face. Cemetery upkeep is something that rural municipalities across Ontario and Canada have an issue with. So this isn't just us. This is a lot of other small municipalities as well. So for council's consideration.
Councilor Emerson.
One off the wall suggestion, like maybe plant growth regulators are cheaper than diesel fuel, and we could cut the rate of grass growth like golf courses do and require less maintenance.
Well, I think it's something that, you could consider. I think, I really appreciate that. That's a farmer fix. That would do it.
What's a golf course fix too?
It's a
Mr.
golf
Mayor?
course fix. Yes, it is. I don't know how it would be received by the community, but it's an interesting idea, an interesting concept. There you give you something to
Hey, I would like to look into it myself. Yeah,
Maybe Councilor Emerson wants to come to the next cemetery joint board meeting.
I'll bring my backpack.
there you go. Interesting, then something to think about. Good idea. Okay. Any other questions on any part of this operating budget? Deputy Mayor Wise.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps maybe not so much a question as it is just a general comment. That I just want to thank staff for the work that they've put into this budget. It is aggressive and strategic. And I really, I'm very pleased to see where we're headed. And that hopefully 2025 is a wonderful year for us. So fingers crossed. And just wanted to make that comment that thank you for your hard work.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's hard work of all the department heads, as well as the CEO's leadership and direction. So it's a team effort here.
I'm scanning quickly here, Lauren, just to make sure that I see where you mentioned in here, of course, the notional levy, but you haven't suggested anywhere in here what you're looking at for possible tax rate. increase.
6.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I didn't see it in the report. I knew what it was. But just for the sake of transparency, we're talking about 6%.
So council is aware that we need to raise notionally 9.
Mhm.
But we only need to raise the property, property rate 6. And what that relates to is the growth that we sustained in the assessments for the year.
Thank you for that. Recognizing, of course, there are a lot of drivers in this. CPI is a really good driver, and the fact that we are still looking at an arrest assessment based on 2016. Even though we've had real growth in our property, okay, they're valued at 2016. So there are a lot of factors driving this. The fact that this budget is mapping out a plan moving forward on how to arrest or mitigate this long-term debt that we have, as well as set the stage for future capital works. Including the potential for stormwater management. And there's always going to be something that creeps into view just down the road, an emergency measure. Something's going to always be there. So I agree with your comments, Deputy Mayor. It's aggressive. It's an ask. But I think if, the community can understand where we're going with this, so that we can actually do something constructive with what we're asking for the community to do and for the community. I think it's responsible.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank the treasurer and senior staff for this. Considering that CPI 10 2022 has been floating in the 6.5 range, we've got a rate below that. We believe that the budget is it's realistic given some of our pressures. We've been creative in ways to address some cost concerns, and it is a strategic budget for how we can approach the next 4 years. We're quite proud for the document we put in front of you tonight. So any questions or commentary is welcome, and looking forward to council's direction.
All right, I'm just scanning the room to see if there's any final comments or questions or concerns. I think everyone understands where we're going. Councilor Rose, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment. I'm excited about this budget as well. Pay off the Ojibwa debt. Like we will, I know it's a little heavy now, but after 2025, we pay that off. Like there should be a lot of pressure off the budget with that off of our books.
Just for comment through Mayor to Councilor Froze, you basically create yourself a $330,000 firepower in your operating budget, as well as now you've also created a 4.2 million ARL. So when capital works, as the mayor's alluded to, comes around, Now we're putting debt to real capital, to real infrastructure that our residents need. And then we can match with provincial and federal level grants, which we have been aggressively working on, and that we will continually aggressively work on for both the stormwater and other needs based on our AMP and other core assets that we need to narrow the asset management deficiency gap.
Further, just really quickly to the treasurer's comments, DMAF program has opened up once more. We fully expect more information to come to council on a revised application for stormwater in Port Burwell. This will likely be something coming to council in early Q2, once staff have a plan in place to review the scope and put something palatable in front of council. Given the timelines for the last round of the DMAP, we would expect that any work on the stormwater system could feasibly begin, if approved, in 2025, which dovetails quite well with paying off the Ojibwa. So for council's information, there's more information forthcoming. Staff are quite excited about the second round of DMAP and looking forward to putting a competitive application in.
As they say at the time, it could almost be perfect.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. If nobody has any other comments or questions, we have a proposed motion before us and I will read it. You have,
Just to clarify the direction regarding the tree program, Mr. Mayor, if you would like to read what you've got, then I'll put an addition on the end.
that is exactly right. I've got it over here so we didn't lose it. All right. The motion reads that report TR 0123 regarding the 2023-2024 operating budget draft be received for information. And that the 2023 operating budget be approved and staff be directed to bring forward a 2023 tax rate bylaws. Actually, should your clause have been between or before that?
It can be either. It's just part of the overall direction.
I'll go ahead.
And the last part of that, Mr. Mayor, and that a report be brought before council regarding changes to the municipal tree program.
Just noting it. Is anyone interested in moving it? Counselor Chilcott will move, and that looks like Deputy Mayor Weiser will second. All in favor? I would say that that is carried. Thank you for that. Moving on to section 4, the confirming bylaw. Mover and second. Counselor Chilcott will move. Counselor Froese will second that confirming bylaw number 2023-006 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. All in favor? That's carried. And the adjournment motion. Counselor Froese will move. Deputy Mayor Weiser will second that the council meeting be adjourned at 7:39 PM. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And thank you for joining us this evening.